Bookish friends, welcome to my August wrap-up part 1. In this video, I will talk about the 7 works that I finished in the first half of August. And like I did in my previous wrap-ups, I will insert the clips that I recorded very soon after I finished those works. Today is the 1st of August and I finished 2 books in the first day of the month. The first one was a graphic novel adaptation of an Agatha Christie book that I was reading for Christie Fest, The Secret Adversary, the first book in Tommy and Tuppence series. This novel, originally published in 1922, it was adapted into a graphic novel by François Rivière in 1995, and it is illustrated by Leclercq. I read the Turkish edition of this graphic novel. In this story, Tommy Beresford and Prudence Cowley, who's nicknamed as Tuppence, are really good friends, and they meet after the First World War and decide to set up a adventure agency called Young Adventurers, and they stumble across a name, Jane Finn, and Tuppence decides to use this name in her first work. And many very dangerous things do follow after Tuppence's decision. I originally gave the novel of The Secret Adversary 3 stars, but it was the time before I gave half-star ratings. Looking at it retrospectively, I think I would have given it a 7 out of 10 in my current day rating, because I thought the story depended too much on the coincidences. And of course, this adaptation, because it has the same story, suffered from the same disadvantage for me. And moreover, because it is a very fast-paced book, I thought some of the things went missing in this fast-paced adaptation. I liked the drawing style very much. It was much better than the illustration style in the other graphic novels adapted from Agatha Christie books. So I gave the graphic novel of The Secret Adversary 6 out of 10, and it is the first book that I read for Bernard's Bookish Bingo for the prompt of rereading a book. The second work that I finished was a carryover from the last month. I finished İstanbul by Burhan Sönmez. I originally started this book as an audiobook, but because it contained many stories within the novel, I decided to switch to the ebook format, and this format worked perfect for me. This novel is a modern take on Decameron, which I read about more than 2 years ago. In Decameron, people escaping from the plague do tell each other stories among themselves, and most of them are funny and stories about sex. Past their time while they are waiting for a plague to disappear. In this book, the take is much more bitter and much more sorrowful. 4 prisoners staying in the same cell during the Turkish military coup in 1980 do tell each other stories and anecdotes, as well as some connections from their past lives. while they're staying in their cells and wait for another episode of very brutal torture. This book also has an English translation. The title is the same, İstanbul, İstanbul. And I will do a Turkish shelf video about this book, which I will talk more about the characters and the significance of the time period in the author's life. This was a very powerful and very emotional book for me. I really liked the witty tone and some even crude sex stories to use the lighten the very dark mood of the story. I also really liked the fact that I knew some of the stories, because it made the story much more believable. The prisoners did not invent stories, but used some of the stories, funny anecdotes, and some passages from very famous books. The common denominator was that they adapted these stories to take place in Istanbul. That was the reason that it was titled İstanbul, İstanbul. It was just an imagination game to get away from the harsh reality that they were living. Because there were so many stories, and it was sometimes hard to follow the main story because of so many interruptions. And the writing style felt too flowery at some parts. So in summary, I was very much affected by this story, and I gave it an 8 out of 10. It is the 4th of August, and I finished 2 very short audiobooks. The first one that I finished in the morning was Murder, Money and Marzipan by Leighan Dobbs. This is the 3rd book in Lexi Baker mystery series. In this series, Lexi Baker is an amateur investigator and also a baker, like her surname suggests, who stumbles across murders and tries to solve them with her potential love interest, detective Jack Perillo. In this 3rd book, Lexi joins a baker's competition, and she finds one of the judges who has been antagonistic to her death while she is delivering her marzipans to the freezer. I'm really enjoying listening to this mystery series. It's very sweet and cozy, and I like the fact that the series consists of novellas, because maybe a more lengthy book with this tone would bore me, but the novella size fits perfectly. And I especially liked that this installment took place in a town that was different from Lexi's hometown. And the lead detective was a woman, which made it different from the previous 2 books. Although there are many more books in the series, there is certainly going to be a repetition. I still think it is good that Leighan Dobbs try new things with this series. The mystery was still a bit predictable. Like the previous 2 installments in this series, I gave this novella a 7 out of 10. And the second, even shorter audiobook that I listened was the 2nd book in a Bear Called Paddington series, which was called More About Paddington. I read the 1st book in March. It was among the top 2 favorite books that I read in the month of March. And the fact that Stephen Fry narrated this sweet short story collection increased my enjoyment of the book. In the 2nd book, more adventures of Paddington Bear, who's trying to cope this new life with the Brown family, are told in a short story format. Although the stories do follow each other chronologically, I think they can be read as standalone short stories too, but they are so short, it's very easy to flow through it. I found the anecdotes about Paddington Also very cute in this collection. My favorite story was the one in which Paddington Bear was trying to be a detective and bought himself a kit, trying to disguise himself. But of course he could not fool anybody, and everybody knew who he was. That was such a witty and cute short story. And this installment was also narrated by Stephen Fry. I love the way that he delivers some of the inner jokes in the text. But unfortunately my application has reduced some of the books from my library. And the third book that was narrated by Stephen Fry is no longer there. Instead, there's a version that I can put in my audiobook library that is narrated by Jim Broadbent, who actually played Mr. Brown on the 2 movies adapted from this series. And he was really good. So although I'm disappointed that Stephen Fry will not narrate some of the following books, I am hopeful for Broadbent's narration too. In summary, I gave More About Paddington by Malcolm Bond an 8 out of 10. Today is the 5th of August and I finished my book club book, Kapak, Kızı by Ayfer Tunç. I previously DNF'd a non-fiction book from this author, so I was a bit hesitant about this one. But many of my friends says that she writes better fiction. So I decided to give Ayfer Tunç another chance and read Kapak, Kızı, which can be translated as the cover girl to English. And in this book, the story is told from 3 points of view. Who have seen the naked pictures of Şebnem, the cover girl, in a men's magazine. And these 3 people do meet in a train. One of them is the head waiter in the restaurant of the train. And he's not connected to Şebnem, the cover girl. The other 2 are the passengers. One is closely related to Şebnem, while the other one is remotely related to Şebnem. But they both knew Şebnem when she was a teenager and have not heard from her since then. And these 3 people do speculate about Şebnem's life, what kind of a woman she is, and also try to make a connection with her through their memories. Some of these memories do include Şebnem, while the others do not. And when the train is stuck on the road because of harsh winter conditions, these 3 people meet and talk, and the night goes on like that. First of all, I have to say, I quite liked the writing style of the author. It was nothing like the non-fiction one. I thought the non-fiction book was very dry and it only talked about the facts. It was not the same for her fiction works. And I quite liked the mystery that revolves around Şebnem. That's why I would read the second book in the series, which tells Şebnem's story. And I will see if the speculations of the characters were true or not. But I have to say, I found the plot device of using coincidences, especially the 2 characters who are related to Şebnem, being on the same train and sitting at the same table, a bit too far-fetched. I thought the character developments of the 2 characters were really very well. I had trouble understanding one of the characters, but he was also a complex one. So overall, I gave Kapak, Kızı by Ayfer Tunç a 7 out of 10. Today is the 11th of August and I finished my May book for Books of Alfred Hitchcock project, The Manxman by Caine. This book was the oldest book that I've read from this project, and it was written in the Victorian period. This book takes place on Isle of Man, and it is basically a story of a love triangle. Philip, his illegitimate cousin Pete, and Kate do grow up together in the island, and the 3 become inseparable. One day Pete, who's a fisherman, decides to make a living for himself, goes abroad to make a fortune. But before going away, he sort of becomes betrothed to Kate. Pete also asks Philip to take care of Kate, but after a couple of years, Philip and Kate start to develop feelings towards each other, and they try to fight these feelings, but of course they are unable to do it. And when Pete comes back with a fortune and wants to marry Kate, things take a very different turn than what Philip and Kate had originally planned. My first comment about this book is that it needed to be shorter, at least by half. I think this book would have been a much better book if the story was wrapped up in about 250 pages. Though the story is very cliché and contains many Victorian dramatic elements, I found the characters and the way that their feelings for each other in terms of friendship, affection, comradeship, love, very good. So it was different from a classic tragedy in that way, and I could not help but love the character of Pete because he was incredibly kind and his love for Kate was admirable. The atmosphere of the book and the island was described very well, though I found some of the details a bit unnecessary. So in summary, I gave this book a 7 out of 10. Today is the 12th of August, and I finished graphic biography Herding Cats by Sarah Andersen. This was also the third book in Sarah's Scribbles series. In this graphic memoir, Sarah Andersen continues to describe some of the funny and ironic anecdotes in her life through a lens of trying to cope of being an adult. Maybe because Sarah was closer to my age in this installment of the graphic memoir, I felt more identified with many of the situations in this installment. There was this wonderful script which I loved and thought a lot about. I really enjoyed this memoir, and I gave Herding Cats by Sarah Andersen an 8 out of 10. So those were the 7 works that I finished in the first half of August. Please comment down below, have you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video? And if you're a new viewer, first of all, welcome. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you very soon. Bye. As for Turkish word of the day, I'm going to choose money. Money means para in Turkish, and para is our Turkish word of the day. Have a good day.